Welcome, dear traveler, to Medieval Sleep Tales, where the gentle glow of the past lights your way to peaceful rest. Tonight, we invite you to step away from the rushing world and into a quieter time, a simpler place where life moved to the rhythm of seasons and the warmth of community sustained every soul. Close your eyes and feel yourself drawn back through the centuries to a small village nestled in the English countryside in the year 1385. The air is cool and crisp with autumn's breath. Morning stars still glitter overhead. And in one modest workshop, where golden light already spills through shuttered windows, a medieval baker begins his day. For the next 3 hours, you are invited to spend a full day in this warm, flower-dusted haven. You'll rise before dawn to kindle the great oven, knead dough with the steady rhythm of centuries. Watch the village awaken around you and find deep contentment in the honest work of feeding your community. This is a story without darkness or distress, only the simple beauty of daily life, the comfort of warm bread, and the peaceful satisfaction of a day well lived. So settle into your favorite place, pull a blanket close, and let the medieval world embrace you. Whether you seek restful sleep, gentle relaxation, or simply a few hours in a kinder, slower world, the baker's hearth awaits you with warmth and welcome. Let us begin our journey together. From Medieval Sleep Tales, A Medieval Baker's Day. Part 1. Before Dawn's Light. The darkness before dawn holds a particular quality in a medieval village, a thickness that seems almost tangible as you move through it. There are no street lamps here, no electric glow seeping from windows, only the distant pinprick of stars overhead, and perhaps a single candle flame flickering behind an oiled parchment window somewhere across the village square. The baker wakes in this deep darkness, as he has every morning for more years than he can count, rising from his straw mattress with the practiced ease of someone whose body knows its rhythms as intimately as the changing seasons. The small room above the bakery holds the warmth of yesterday's baking still, a residual heat that rises through the floorboards from the great stone oven below. His wife sleeps on beside him, her breathing soft and even, and he moves carefully so as not to disturb her rest. His woolen tunic hangs on a peg near the bed, and he pulls it over his linen undershift, feeling the familiar scratch of homespun cloth against his skin. His leather shoes, worn smooth by countless trips between mixing table and oven, wait by the ladder that leads down to the workshop. Descending into the bakery, he carries no light at first. His hands know every rung of the ladder, every board in the floor, every corner of this space that has been his life's work and his father's before him. The darkness here is not empty, but filled with presences. Sacks of grain standing like silent sentinels along one wall, the great mixing trough waiting patiently for today's dough, wooden peels hanging from their hooks, ready to slide loaves into the oven's heat. The air smells of flour dust, old smoke, and that indefinable scent of a place where bread has been made for generations. His first task, performed in darkness still, is to approach the oven. The great stone structure dominates one entire wall of the workshop, its arched opening like the mouth of some benevolent cave. He kneels before it, and even before his hands touch the iron door, he can feel the heat radiating outward. The fire was banked carefully last night, coals buried under a blanket of ash to keep them smoldering through the dark hours. Now he must coax them back to life. Opening the iron door releases a breath of warmth into the cool workshop, and by the faint red glow of surviving embers, he can finally see. It is not much light, just enough to reveal the outlines of things, but it is sufficient. He reaches for the ash rake leaning beside the oven, and carefully draws back the gray covering he laid over the coals before retiring. Underneath, the embers glow like captured sunset, orange and red, and occasionally flickering with brief yellow flame. The heat on his face is immediate and welcome, and he allows himself a moment to simply kneel there, hands outstretched, absorbing the warmth. The wood he needs for building up the fire was stacked yesterday evening, split oak and beech that has been drying in the workshop for months. He selects pieces carefully, knowing from long experience exactly how the fire needs to be built. Too much wood too quickly, and he smothers the struggling coals. Too little, and the oven will not reach the temperature needed for today's baking. He begins with kindling, small pieces that catch easily from the embers, arranging them in a careful structure that allows air to flow through. When the kindling begins to crackle and spit, he adds larger pieces, building the fire with the focused attention of someone performing a sacred ritual. As the fire grows, so does the light. Flames dance now in the oven's mouth, casting moving shadows across the workshop walls. The stone walls themselves seem to wake and breathe, their surfaces coming alive with the play of firelight. The baker can see properly now, though he hardly needs to. His hands could do this work in total darkness, have done it on winter mornings when snow piled against the shutters and dawn seemed reluctant to arrive. While the fire builds and the oven begins its slow journey toward baking heat, he turns to other preparations. A water bucket stands near the door, and he dips a wooden cup into it, drinking deeply. The water is cold and clean, drawn yesterday evening from the village well, and it clears the sleep from his throat. He splashes a bit on his face, gasping slightly at the shock of cold, feeling fully awake now as the water drips from his beard. The grain sacks stand waiting, and he moves among them with purpose. Today's bread will be mostly rye with some wheat mixed in, the standard loaves that form the foundation of every villager's diet. He also plans to make a few white wheat loaves for the manor house and some honey cakes that the village children save their smallest coins to buy. Each type of bread requires its particular grain, measured out with the care of someone who knows that flour represents labor and harvest, sun and rain, and human sweat combined. He opens the rye sack first, and the smell that rises from it speaks of autumn fields and honest earth. Using a wooden scoop worn smooth by decades of use, he begins transferring grain into the hand mill that sits on a sturdy table near the oven. The mill is a simple device, two circular stones stacked one atop the other, the upper stone turned by a wooden handle that extends from its side. The grain is poured into a hole in the center of the upper stone, and as the stone rotates, the grain is ground between the two surfaces, emerging as flour from the edges. Grinding grain is meditative work, a steady circular motion that requires strength but not strain, attention but not intense focus. The wooden handle fits perfectly in his palm, worn to match the exact curve of his grip. Round and round it goes, and the mill produces a sound like distant thunder or rain on a thatched roof, a low grinding whisper that fills the workshop with its rhythm. Flour begins to appear, pale and fine, collecting in the wooden bowl he has placed beneath the mill's edge. The baker's shoulders work steadily, his breath falling into rhythm with the motion, and his mind drifts to the day ahead. He thinks about the villagers who will come to buy their daily bread, faces he has known all his life. Old Thomas the shepherd, who always arrives first, before even the cocks have crowed, to collect the dark rye loaf he prefers. Margaret the weaver, who likes her bread with extra salt and always has a bit of gossip to share. Young Peter the carpenter's apprentice, who will come at midday with coins wrapped in a cloth, sent by his master to fetch white rolls for the afternoon meal. The priest from the village church, who will collect the special loaves baked for tomorrow's feast day, bread that will be blessed and distributed after Mass. Each face represents a connection, a thread in the web of community that holds the village together. The baker knows their preferences, their families, their struggles and celebrations. When Margaret's daughter married last spring, he baked special sweet buns studded with dried fruit. When old Thomas lost his wife last winter, the baker sent bread to his cottage every day for a fortnight, refusing payment, understanding that grief sometimes makes even the simple act of eating seem impossible. This is what it means to be a village baker, not merely to produce food, but to be woven into the daily life of everyone around you. The flour accumulates slowly, and when he has ground enough rye, he moves on to wheat. The wheat grain is smaller, harder, and the grinding requires slightly more effort. The flour it produces is finer, paler, almost luminous in the growing firelight. This flour is more precious, more expensive, and most villagers can afford it only occasionally. But the manor house wants white bread regularly, and there are always a few customers willing to spend extra for the softer texture and milder flavor of wheat loaves. As he works, the oven continues its transformation. The fire has grown substantial now, flames reaching upward into the domed interior, heat building layer by layer in the thick stones. The oven's thermal mass is its virtue. Once fully heated, it will hold that heat for hours, radiating it evenly from all sides, creating the perfect environment for baking bread. But achieving that heat takes time, and the baker must judge carefully when the moment is right. Too soon, and the loaves will not cook through. Too late, and he risks burning the crusts before the centers are done. The first hints of dawn are beginning to show now, not through the shuttered windows, which remain closed against the night cold, but in a sense, the baker has developed over years of rising before the sun. Some internal clock tells him that the darkness outside is thinning, that the stars are beginning to fade, that the world is preparing itself for another day. Soon the cocks will crow. Soon the first smoke will begin rising from cottage chimneys as other families wake and kindle their own fires. Soon the village will stir and stretch and emerge into morning. But for now, this moment remains his alone. The workshop is a world complete unto itself, warm and glowing with firelight, filled with the good smell of grain and smoke. He finishes grinding the wheat and moves to measure out the other ingredients he will need. Salt from the clay pot on the shelf, precious and expensive, but essential for giving bread its savor. Water from the bucket, which he will warm slightly by setting the bowl near the oven. And most important, the sourdough starter that lives in a crock on the coolest corner of the mixing table. The starter is older than the baker himself, passed down from his father, who received it from his father before him. It is a living thing, a culture of wild yeasts and beneficial bacteria that gives the bread its distinctive tangy flavor and its ability to rise. Every time he makes bread, he reserves a portion of the dough to feed the starter, and in return, the starter gives life to new loaves. This exchange has continued unbroken for generations, a living link to all the bakers who have worked in this space before him. He lifts the cloth that covers the crock and breathes in the starter's scent, sharp and complex, like fruit on the edge of fermentation. It looks healthy, bubbles visible on its surface, and he nods in satisfaction. Taking a wooden spoon, he scoops out the amount he needs and transfers it to the large mixing trough. Then he adds fresh flour and water to what remains in the crock, stirring it gently, feeding the culture so it will be ready for tomorrow's baking. The starter bubbles and sighs under his spoon, almost as if acknowledging the attention. Now comes the heart of the work, the part that transforms separate ingredients into something greater than the sum of its parts. He begins to add flour to the mixing trough, alternating with warm water, working it together with his hands. The initial mixture is shaggy and uneven, but as he continues to work it, folding and pressing, it begins to come together. His hands have done this thousands upon thousands of times, and they work with their own intelligence now, feeling for the right consistency, the proper balance of wet and dry. The dough is cool at first, but as he kneads, it warms under his palms. His knuckles press into it, pushing the mass away from him, and his fingers fold it back, turn it, press again. The rhythm is ancient and unchanging, the same motion bakers have used since the first human being discovered that grain and water and heat could become bread. There is something profoundly satisfying about this work, something that connects him not just to his father and grandfather, but to an unbroken chain of humanity stretching back into the mists of time. As he kneads, he can feel the dough changing. What began as a collection of particles gradually becomes a unified whole. The gluten in the flour, activated by water and encouraged by the working of his hands, begins to form long elastic strands that give the dough structure. It becomes smoother, more cohesive, more alive. When he presses into it, it springs back. When he stretches it, it resists gently before yielding. This is the magic of bread making, watching mere ingredients transform into something with character and personality of its own. The fire crackles, the oven radiates heat, and the baker kneads, his hands moving in their eternal rhythm, his mind at peace, his heart content with the simple goodness of this work. Outside, unseen but sensed, the world prepares for dawn. Inside this warm workshop, bathed in firelight and flour dust, a medieval baker does what bakers have always done: creates sustenance, creates community, creates the daily bread that makes life possible. The kneading continues for a time that is measured not by any clock, but by the feel of the dough itself. The baker knows when it is ready, knows it in his bones and muscles, in the way the dough no longer sticks to his fingers, in the way it has transformed from a rough mass into something smooth and elastic and alive with potential. He gives it one final fold, then covers the trough with a clean linen cloth and sets it near the oven where the warmth will encourage the dough to rise. While the dough rests and begins its slow expansion, as the yeast awakens and feeds on the flour, he turns his attention to the oven itself. The fire has been burning for well over an hour now, and he judges by the color of the flames and the feel of the heat that it is nearly ready. The interior of the oven glows with an intense orange light, and when he holds his hand near the opening, the heat is almost too much to bear. This is good. This is what he needs. But first, the ashes and embers must be cleared. Using a long-handled iron rake, he pulls the burning wood forward, gathering it near the oven's mouth. Then, with practiced skill, he uses a flat shovel to scoop out the coals and deposit them in an iron bucket kept for this purpose. The work is hot and requires care. One stray ember landing on the wooden floor could spell disaster, not just for the bakery but potentially for the entire village, where houses stand close together and fire is the enemy every household fears most. When the oven floor is clear of coals, he takes up a large bundle of damp straw tied to the end of a long pole. This he uses to sweep the oven's interior, the wet straw hissing and steaming as it contacts the hot stones, cleaning away the last of the ash. The steam that rises carries the smell of wet straw and heated stone, a scent unique to bakeries, one that anyone who has ever bought bread from a village baker would recognize instantly. Now the oven is ready, its stones saturated with heat, its interior clean and waiting, but the bread is not yet prepared. He returns to the mixing trough and uncovers the dough, pleased to see that it has already begun to rise, growing larger, its surface becoming smooth and rounded. The yeast is working, feeding on the flour sugars, releasing tiny bubbles of carbon dioxide that get trapped in the gluten network, causing the dough to expand. He dusts the wooden work table with flour and turns out the dough, watching it spread and settle under its own weight. The surface glistens slightly, almost as if it were breathing. Using a sharp knife, he begins to divide it into portions, cutting with swift, sure strokes, his eye judging weight and size with the accuracy born of decades of practice. Each portion represents a loaf, and each loaf must be similar in size so that they bake evenly and customers know what to expect when they come to purchase their daily bread. The shaping of the loaves is another art, another skill that looks simple but contains layers of nuance. He takes each portion and begins to work it, folding the edges underneath, creating surface tension that will help the loaf hold its shape and rise properly in the oven. His hands move with confidence, pressing and turning, until each piece of dough has become a neat round ball sitting on the floured table. As he works, he hears the first cock crow somewhere in the village, its voice carrying clear through the cool pre-dawn air. It is answered by another, and then another, until it seems every rooster in the valley is announcing the approaching day. The baker smiles, recognizing the voices of individual birds, knowing which comes from the farm at the edge of the village, which from the manor house courtyard, which from the cottage next to the mill. These sounds are the village's morning chorus, as regular and reliable as the seasons themselves. He covers the shaped loaves with cloth again and lets them rest, undergoing their second rise while he prepares the special breads he plans to make today. The white wheat loaves for the manor house require finer flour, which he has already ground and keeps in a covered bowl. He mixes these in a smaller trough, using only the starter, wheat flour, a bit of salt, and water. These loaves will be lighter, whiter, softer than the rye bread that forms most people's daily sustenance. The honey cakes are mixed in a ceramic bowl, combining wheat flour with honey purchased from the village beekeeper, eggs from his own chickens kept in a coop behind the bakery, and a touch of precious cinnamon brought by a traveling merchant last month. As he mixes these ingredients, the smell of honey fills the workshop, sweet and golden, reminding him of summer meadows and buzzing hives. These little cakes will be formed into rounds and baked quickly once the loaves are done, and by late morning, children will press their faces against his shutters, coins clutched in small fists, hoping their parents can spare the penny needed for such a treat. The light outside is changing now, no longer the absolute darkness of deep night, but the gray half-light that precedes true dawn. Through the cracks around the shutters, he can see it growing brighter. Soon he will open them and let in the morning, but for now, he likes this transitional time, this moment between night and day when the workshop feels like a warm cave, protected and apart from the waking world. He checks the risen loaves and finds them ready, their surface smooth and domed, doubled in size from their shaped weight. With a sharp blade, he makes a quick slash across the top of each loaf, a mark that will allow steam to escape during baking and create the characteristic appearance of a well-made loaf. Some bakers mark their bread with distinctive patterns. His mark is a simple cross, partly for tradition, partly as a blessing on the food his hands create. Using the long wooden peel, he begins to transfer loaves into the oven. The peel slides under each loaf smoothly, and with a practiced jerk and twist, he deposits them onto the oven's floor. The heat is intense, and he works quickly, positioning each loaf with care to ensure even baking. When the last common loaf is in place, he slides the iron door partially closed, leaving just enough opening to monitor the baking without losing too much heat. Almost immediately, he can smell the bread beginning to bake, a scent that is somehow both simple and infinitely complex. The smell of transformation, of grain becoming sustenance, of chemistry and biology, and heat combining to create one of humanity's oldest and most essential foods. The smell fills the workshop and begins to drift through the cracks around the door and windows, a signal to the village that the bakery is alive and working, that soon there will be fresh bread to buy. He uses the time while the loaves bake to shape and prepare the wheat bread for the manor house, giving these smaller, finer loaves their own careful attention. His hands are white with flour now, his leather apron dusted with it, and there are smudges on his face where he has absently wiped away sweat. The workshop is warm from the oven's heat, comfortable despite the autumn chill outside. When he judges the time is right, he opens the oven door fully and peers inside. The loaves have risen further in the heat, their slashed tops opening like smiles, their crusts beginning to turn a beautiful golden brown. Using the peel, he carefully rotates each loaf, ensuring even baking, then closes the door again for the final minutes of cooking. Outside, dawn has fully arrived. He can hear voices now, people stirring, calling to one another, the sounds of daily life beginning throughout the village. He moves to the window and throws open the shutters, and cool morning air rushes in, carrying with it the smell of wood smoke from other hearths, the distant lowing of cattle being led to pasture, the rhythmic clank of the blacksmith's hammer from his forge down the lane. The sky is streaked with pink and gold, clouds catching the first rays of sun that has not yet cleared the eastern hills. Mist rises from the river beyond the village, creating ghostly patterns that will burn away as the morning advances. It is going to be a beautiful day, he thinks, a perfect autumn day, cool and clear and filled with the kind of golden light that makes even ordinary things seem touched with grace. He returns to the oven and opens it one final time. The loaves are perfect, their crusts a deep golden brown, their tops cracked where he scored them, steam still rising from their surfaces. Using the peel, he removes them one by one and sets them on wooden racks to cool. The workshop fills with their aroma and smells so fundamental to human comfort that it needs no description, only to be experienced and recognized and welcomed. The wheat loaves go into the oven next, along with the small honey cakes arranged on a flat pan. These will bake more quickly than the rye loaves, and he tends them carefully, knowing that their lighter dough can burn more easily. While they bake, he takes one of the cooled rye loaves and tears off a piece from its end. The crust crunches under his fingers, and when he bites into it, the bread is still warm, its interior soft and slightly tangy from the sourdough, its flavor honest and satisfying. This is the baker's privilege, this first bread of the day, eaten standing in his workshop as morning light streams through the window and the village comes alive outside his door. He has been awake for hours, has labored in darkness and firelight, has transformed flour and water into sustenance for his community. This moment, this simple act of eating bread he has made with his own hands, is a reward beyond price. The day has truly begun now, and soon the first customers will arrive. The workshop is warm and bright, filled with the smell of fresh bread and the satisfaction of work begun well. The baker wipes the flour from his hands and prepares to greet the day and all who will come seeking the comfort of warm bread and the simple assurance that life continues in its ancient, dependable rhythms. Part 2. The village awakens. The first customer arrives even before the baker has finished arranging the cooling loaves on the wide wooden shelf that serves as his counter. It is old Thomas the shepherd, just as the baker knew it would be, his weathered face appearing in the doorway like the reliable turning of seasons. Thomas has been coming to this bakery since he was a boy, purchasing bread from the baker's father before him, and now in his advanced years, he moves more slowly but arrives no less punctually, his shepherd's crook in one gnarled hand and a small leather purse in the other. "Good morning to you, Thomas," the baker calls, genuine warmth in his voice. "I have your dark rye waiting, baked not a quarter hour past." Thomas steps fully into the workshop, and his face transforms as the warmth and smell of fresh bread envelop him. This is an expression the baker sees countless times each day, this moment of pure sensory pleasure that crosses a person's features when they enter a bakery where bread is still warm from the oven. It is one of the deep rewards of his profession, witnessing this small but genuine happiness he can bring to people's lives. "You're a blessing, Master Baker," Thomas says, his voice rough from years of calling to sheep across windy hillsides. These old bones feel the autumn chill more each year, and there's nothing better than warm bread to chase it away. The baker selects the darkest loaf, knowing Thomas prefers his bread with the most rye, the strongest flavor, the densest texture. He wraps it in a square of clean linen cloth and accepts the 3 small coins Thomas counts out carefully from his purse. They are worn smooth, these coins, passed from hand to hand through countless transactions, each one representing labor and exchange, the lifeblood of the village economy. "How are the sheep faring?" the baker asks, because this is what neighbors do, this inquiry into each other's lives, this maintenance of connection that makes a collection of houses into a true community. Thomas's face lights up with the particular joy of someone asked about his life's work. "Fat and healthy, thanks be to God. The lambs born this spring have grown strong, and I'll be taking the ram lambs to market next month. The wool harvest was good this year, too. Margaret the weaver says it's some of the finest I've brought her." They talk for a few more minutes, standing in the warm workshop while outside the village continues its awakening. The baker learns that Thomas's daughter, who lives 2 villages away, is expecting her 3rd child. That one of the younger sheepdogs is showing great promise. That Thomas is thinking of asking his nephew to come help with the flock, as the hills grow steeper each year and his knees less reliable. These are the ordinary details of an ordinary life, but shared between neighbors, they become threads in the larger tapestry of community. When Thomas departs, tucking the bread carefully under his arm and whistling to his old dog who waits patiently outside, the baker returns to his work with a smile. This is why he loves these morning hours, these first interactions of the day when people are fresh and the world still holds the promise of new beginnings. More customers arrive in steady succession now. Agnes from the tavern comes for 6 large loaves, the daily bread that will feed her household, and the travelers who sometimes stop for a meal and a night's lodging. She is a robust woman, with a laugh like church bells and hands red from endless washing and scrubbing. She and the baker banter easily, old friends who have known each other since childhood, and she tells him about the merchant who stayed last night, a man from the coast who brought tailies of ships from distant lands, carrying silk and spices and other wonders. He says there are places where the sun shines all year, Agnes reports, shaking her head in wonder. Can you imagine? No winter at all. Just endless summer. The baker, who cannot quite conceive of such a thing, who knows the world through its seasons, and cannot imagine life without the cycle of planting and harvest, of cold and warmth, simply smiles and says that perhaps the merchant tells tall tales to entertain his hosts. Perhaps, Agnes agrees, but it's nice to imagine, isn't it? All that warmth and sunshine. Young William, the miller's son, comes next, sent by his father to purchase bread for their large household. William is perhaps 14, caught in that awkward stage between boyhood and manhood, his voice uncertain whether to squeak or rumble, his limbs seeming too long for his body. But he is earnest and polite, and the baker treats him with the respect due to someone learning to navigate adult responsibilities. 4 loaves, if you please, William says, standing as straight as he can manage. And father says to tell you he has fresh ground flour when you need it. The baker nods, making a mental note. The relationship between baker and miller is essential. The miller grinds grain for the entire village, and the baker is one of his most regular customers. Tell your father I'll come by tomorrow afternoon. I'm running low on wheat flour, and I'll need a good supply for next week's baking. He adds an extra small honey cake to William's basket, wrapped separately. For you, he says, waving away the boy's attempt to pay. You're growing like a weed, and a young man needs something sweet now and then. William's face flushes with pleasure, and he stammers his thanks before hurrying out, no doubt eager to eat the cake before he reaches home and has to share it with his younger siblings. The baker watches him go with affection, remembering William was barely tall enough to see over the counter, sent on errands by his mother, with coins tied into the corner of a handkerchief so he wouldn't lose them. Margaret the weaver arrives mid-morning, carrying her basket and wearing the perpetually preoccupied expression of someone whose mind is always half occupied with the pattern on her loom. She and the baker have a particular friendship, built on their similar roles in the village. Both create essential goods through skilled handwork. Both keep long hours at their crafts. Both take pride in quality and consistency. 2 loaves of the salted rye, she says, then leans in conspiratorially. And tell me true, is it the same with you? Do you sometimes dream you're still working? I wake in the night, and my hands are moving as if throwing the shuttle, and I have to remind myself I'm in bed and not at the loom. The baker laughs, a deep, genuine sound, all the time. I dream I'm kneading dough, or that I've forgotten to tend the oven and the bread is burning. My wife says I sometimes make kneading motions in my sleep. They share a moment of mutual understanding, the recognition that passes between those who have given their lives to a craft, whose work has become so fundamental to their identity that it infiltrates even their dreaming hours. Margaret selects her loaves carefully, pressing gently on the crusts to test their texture, and nods in satisfaction. You always make good bread, she says simply. My grandmother, God rest her soul, used to say you could tell everything about a baker by his daily rye. Fancy breads are easy to make look special, she said, but honest rye bread shows true skill. The compliment pleases him deeply, more than flowery praise ever could, because it comes from someone who understands quality and consistency and the pride of work well done. He adds a small extra piece of bread to her basket, and though she protests, he insists, and they both know this small gesture of generosity is part of the fabric that holds the village together. As the morning progresses, the workshop settles into its rhythm. The baker works steadily, mixing new batches of dough for tomorrow's baking, cleaning and organizing his tools, tending the fire which must be kept alive all day, feeding it fresh wood at intervals to maintain the heat needed for successive bakings. Between customers, he shapes and bakes more specialized items. Small rolls for the manor house, sweet buns with dried fruit for the upcoming holy day, a special braided loaf commissioned for a family celebrating a betrothal. The sun climbs higher, streaming through the open window and door, creating patterns of light and shadow across the flour-dusted floor. Sounds from the village filter in constantly. The ring of the blacksmith's anvil, the creak of cartwheels on the dirt road, voices calling greetings and conducting business, the barking of dogs, and the occasional complaint of chickens being herded from one place to another. These sounds are the soundtrack of village life, so familiar that the baker barely registers them consciously, yet their absence would be immediately noticeable and disturbing. Peter the carpenter's apprentice arrives at midday, as expected, sent by his master to fetch white rolls for the afternoon meal. Peter is a serious young man, quiet and focused, and the baker knows he is learning his trade with dedication. There is always flour under his fingernails, the mark of someone who works with his hands, though in Peter's case, it is sawdust rather than flour that permanently inhabits the cracks and crevices of his skin. Master John says to thank you for the trestle table, the baker says as he wraps the rolls. He says it's the finest piece of carpentry he's seen, and his wife is delighted with it. Peter's face shows his pleasure at the compliment, though he shakes his head modestly. Master did most of the work. I only helped with the finish and the joints. Nonsense, the baker replies firmly. I watched you working on it through the window when I walked past the workshop. Your hands moved with confidence and skill. Your master is training you well, but the skill is your own. This small affirmation, this recognition of developing talent, matters more than Peter's face reveals, though the baker sees the straightening of his shoulders, the slight lift of his chin. The young need encouragement, need to hear that their efforts are noticed and valued, and the baker remembers his own youth, the way his father's occasional words of praise sustained him through months of difficult learning. The bread for the manor house must be delivered, and the baker's wife takes on this task, descending from the runes above where she has been managing their household. She is a capable woman, practical and organized, her graying hair tucked neatly under a clean linen coif, her dress simple but well maintained. They have been married for more than 20 years, and they work together with the smooth coordination of people who know each other's rhythms and needs without requiring constant discussion. I'll take the white bread up to the manor, she says, already wrapping the special loaves in the finest cloth kept for this purpose. And I need to stop at the well on the way back, so I'll bring fresh water. He nods, grateful as always for her partnership, her willingness to share the burdens and blessings of their life together. She is not merely the baker's wife, but an essential part of the bakery's operation, managing supplies, keeping accounts, ensuring that the household runs smoothly so he can focus on his craft. When she leaves, basket on her arm, he watches her walk up the lane toward the manor house that sits on the low hill above the village, and he feels a deep contentment with the life they have built together. The afternoon brings its own rhythm, slightly slower than the morning's busy parade of customers, but steady nonetheless. The baker uses this time to work on tomorrow's preparation, to check his supplies of flour and salt and honey, to split more wood for the oven, to perform the 100 small maintenance tasks that keep a bakery running smoothly. His hands are never idle. There is always something to do, some way to make the work easier or the product better. Father Benedict from the village church arrives in mid-afternoon, his black cassock dusty from the road, his face lined with both age and the weight of spiritual responsibility for the village's souls. He comes to collect the special loaves baked for tomorrow's holy day, bread that will be blessed during Mass and distributed to the congregation as part of this sacred observance. "Bless you, my son," Father Benedict says, examining the loaves with appreciation. "These will serve well in tomorrow's celebration. Your bread always honors both the grain God provided and the skill He granted you to transform it." They talk for a while about parish matters, about the upcoming holy day, about old widow Ellen, who is ill and in need of the community's prayers and practical support. The baker mentions that he will send bread to her cottage each day until she is recovered, and Father Benedict nods in approval, recognizing this as the kind of charity that Christ commanded. Not grand gestures, but the steady, quiet care of neighbor for neighbor. "The village is blessed to have you," the priest says as he prepares to leave, the blessed loaves carefully wrapped and cradled in his arms. A good baker feeds both body and spirit. There is something holy in the breaking of bread, something that connects us to the Last Supper and to every meal shared in fellowship since. After he leaves, the baker stands for a moment in quiet reflection, considering the priest's words. He has never thought of his work in such elevated terms, has always seen himself as simply a craftsman providing a necessary service. But perhaps there is truth in what Father Benedict said. Perhaps in the daily act of baking bread, in feeding his community, in creating something wholesome and nourishing from simple ingredients, there is indeed something sacred, something that connects him to a larger purpose. The afternoon light begins to deepen, taking on that particular golden quality that comes in autumn, when the sun sits lower in the sky and its light must travel through more atmosphere, picking up warmth and richness along the way. The baker begins the process of banking the oven fire for the evening, carefully arranging the remaining coals, covering them with ash so they will smolder through the night and be ready to kindle again at tomorrow's dawn. His wife returns with fresh water and news from the manor house. The Lord's daughter is to be married in the spring to a knight from a neighboring estate, and there will be great celebrations. The baker's mind immediately begins planning the special breads he will need to prepare, the quantities required to feed what will surely be a large gathering of nobility and their retinues. This is the kind of commission that brings both prestige and profit, and he feels a flutter of excitement at the prospect of demonstrating his skills for such an important occasion. The last customers of the day trickle in as the sun begins its descent toward the western horizon. These are people who could not come earlier, who have been busy with their own work all day, and now need bread for their evening meals. The baker serves them all with the same courtesy and care he showed his first customer at dawn. Because each person deserves attention and respect, each purchase matters to the household it will feed. By the time he closes the shutters and bars the door, the workshop is dim with evening shadows. The day's work is done, the oven cooling, the shelves nearly empty of the bread that filled them this morning. He is tired, as he is every evening, but it is a good tiredness. The satisfaction that comes from a full day of productive labor, from work that matters and is appreciated. Upstairs, his wife has prepared their evening meal, and he climbs the ladder to join her, leaving the workshop to its nighttime quietness. They eat together, talking about the day's events, about tomorrow's plans, about the small details that make up their shared life. The food is simple but good. Bread, of course, with cheese and onions and the last of summer's vegetables from their small garden. After the meal, in the final hour before sleep, he sits by the window and looks out over the darkening village. Lights begin to appear in windows as families kindle evening fires and light their precious candles. Smoke rises from chimneys, carrying the smell of cooking food and burning wood. Somewhere a mother calls her children home. Somewhere a dog barks. Somewhere church bells ring the evening prayers. This is his world, this village, these people, this daily round of work and rest and work again. It is not a grand world, not filled with adventure or unusual events, but it is real and solid and good. In this workshop, with his hands and his skill, he plays his small but essential part in keeping this community alive and fed and connected. Tomorrow, he will rise again before dawn, will kindle the fire again, will knead and shape and bake again, and the village will wake to the smell of fresh bread again, as it has for generations, as it will for generations to come. The thought brings him peace, this sense of continuity, of being part of something larger and longer than his own individual life. He is a link in a chain that stretches both backward and forward through time, connecting all the bakers who came before with all those who will come after. His hands perform the same motions his grandfather's hands performed, and someday, if God grants him a son or daughter to follow in his trade, those same motions will be performed by hands not yet trained, not yet skilled, but willing to learn. The darkness deepens, and one by one, the village lights wink out as families settle into sleep. The baker remains a while longer at the window, reluctant to leave this quiet moment of reflection. The stars emerge overhead, brilliant and countless, and a thin crescent moon hangs low in the west. The air is cool and still, carrying the mingled scents of wood smoke and autumn leaves and the distant river. Finally, he rises and prepares for bed, moving quietly so as not to disturb his wife, who has already retired. He removes his flour-dusted tunic and lies down on the straw mattress, pulling the wool blanket up against the night's chill. Below him, the bakery waits in darkness, its oven holding warmth in its stones, ready to be awakened at dawn. And around him, the village sleeps, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow there will be bread, that the baker will rise before them and prepare the daily sustenance that makes their lives possible. His eyes close, and sleep comes quickly, bringing with it dreams of mixing and kneading, of fires and ovens, of bread rising and baking, and filling the world with its good smell. And in those dreams, as in his waking hours, he is content, fulfilled by work that matters, at peace with his place in the great ongoing story of this small village and its people. Part 3. The Circle Complete. The second day of the week dawns much like the first, with the baker rising in darkness to kindle the oven and begin the eternal cycle once more. Yet each day, though following the same pattern, brings its own particular character, its own small variations that keep the work from becoming mere monotonous repetition. Today the wind has shifted, blowing from the north, carrying with it the first real bite of approaching winter. Today the bread dough rises more slowly, requiring patience and adjustment. Today a traveler passing through the village stops to purchase bread and shares news from distant towns, expanding the baker's understanding of the world beyond his immediate horizon. This is the rhythm of a baker's life, not grand adventures or dramatic changes, but the subtle variations within a steady, dependable pattern. Like the seasons themselves, like the phases of the moon, like the daily journey of the sun across the sky, the baker's work follows cycles that repeat, yet never exactly duplicate. Each loaf of bread is similar to every other loaf, yet each is also unique, shaped by countless small variables. The exact temperature of the oven, the humidity in the air, the particular batch of flour, the baker's mood and energy that day, the way his hands move through the familiar motions. As morning progresses and the village comes alive around him, the baker finds himself reflecting on the nature of his craft. There is a paradox at its heart. Bread is simultaneously the most common and the most essential food. It is so ordinary that people rarely think about it consciously, yet its absence would be immediately catastrophic. A village can survive without many things, but it cannot long survive without bread. The baker's work, therefore, carries a weight of responsibility that he feels in his bones, even if he rarely articulates it in words. He thinks about the grain that becomes his flour, about the farmers who planted and tended and harvested it, working under sun and rain, their backs bent over the earth from dawn until dusk throughout the growing season. He thinks about the miller who grinds the grain, turning great millstones with the power of the river, transforming hard seeds into powder fine enough to become bread. He thinks about his own work, mixing and kneading and baking, and then about the people who will eat this bread, whose labor and lives depend on the sustenance it provides. There is a chain of dependence here, a web of relationships that connects every person in the community. The farmer needs the baker to turn his grain into food. The baker needs the farmer to grow the grain in the first place. The miller serves both, and is served by both in return. The carpenter builds the mixing troughs and shelves the baker requires, and is paid partly in bread. The blacksmith forges the iron tools and oven doors, and his wife purchases loaves each morning. Round and round it goes, an intricate dance of mutual need and mutual support that binds the village together far more securely than any lord's decree or church's commandment. The morning brings a steady flow of familiar faces, and with each customer, the baker engages in the small conversations that maintain these bonds of community. He learns that the blacksmith's daughter is recovering from her fever, that the cooper has finished the new barrels for the tavern, that someone saw a deer with magnificent antlers at the edge of the forest yesterday evening. These small pieces of information might seem trivial, but they are the substance from which community is woven, the shared knowledge that makes a collection of individuals into something larger and more resilient than the sum of their parts. Around midday, when the initial rush of customers has passed and the workshop falls into a quieter rhythm, the baker takes time to work on a special project. The harvest festival is approaching, and for this occasion, he plans to create a display loaf, an elaborate bread shaped and decorated to honor the season's bounty. This is not bread meant primarily for eating, though it is certainly edible, but bread is art, as celebration, as an offering of thanksgiving for the year's harvest. He takes a portion of the finest wheat dough and begins to shape it, not into simple rounds, but into more complex forms. His hands work with intense concentration now, forming sheaves of wheat from braided dough, creating grapes from small balls arranged in clusters, fashioning leaves with carefully scored veins. This work requires different skills than his daily baking, a blend of sculptural vision and technical execution, and he loses himself in it completely, aware of nothing but the dough under his fingers and the image in his mind's eye. The afternoon sun streams through the window, illuminating the flour dust that hangs perpetually in the air of every bakery, turning it into a golden mist that seems almost magical in its beauty. The baker works within this light, his hands moving with sureness, creating something that transcends mere function and enters the realm of beauty. When he finally steps back to examine his work, he feels a deep satisfaction. The display loaf sits on the board before him, an elaborate celebration of autumn's plenty, ready to be baked and then displayed at the harvest festival where the whole village will gather. This ability to create beauty within utility, to transform necessary work into something that also uplifts the spirit, is perhaps the deepest satisfaction of the baker's craft. Yes, bread is essential for survival, but it can also be more than that. It can be an expression of skill and creativity, a gift to the community that feeds not just bodies, but also souls. A baker knows that when villagers see this display loaf at the festival, they will smile, will feel proud of their baker, will experience a moment of joy and appreciation for the good things of life. And that matters, perhaps as much as the daily sustenance he provides. His wife descends from the living quarters, bringing with her fresh water, and the news that a peddler has arrived in the village square, selling ribbons and thread and small luxuries. She asks if he needs anything, and he requests a new brush for cleaning the oven, as his current one is worn nearly to nothing. She nods and departs again, and he watches her go with affection, thinking how fortunate he is to have a partner who understands his work and supports it without complaint, even though it means rising before dawn and living with the constant presence of flour dust and oven heat. The afternoon brings an unexpected visitor, a young man from 3 villages away who has heard of the baker's reputation and wishes to apprentice himself to learn the trade. He stands awkwardly in the doorway, cap in hand, his face showing both hope and nervousness. The baker invites him in and they talk, the young man explaining that his father is a farmer with too many sons, that he has always loved the smell of bread and feels drawn to the baker's craft, that he is willing to work hard and learn diligently. The baker listens carefully, assessing not just the words, but the character behind them. Taking on an apprentice is a serious commitment, a responsibility that extends beyond mere technical training to encompass the shaping of a young person's character and future. He asks questions, probing gently to understand the youth's temperament and dedication. Does he rise easily in the morning, or is he one who struggles to wake? Can he work for hours at repetitive tasks without complaint? Is he patient enough to let dough rise in its own time, or does he try to rush natural processes? The young man answers honestly, admitting that he sometimes struggles with early rising, but is determined to overcome this, that he understands the need for patience and routine, that his father has taught him the value of steady, consistent work. The baker nods thoughtfully. He has been considering taking an apprentice, has thought that perhaps it is time to begin passing on his knowledge, but he has hesitated, unsure whether he wants to shoulder that responsibility. Come back in 3 days, he finally says. Come at dawn, before the village wakes, and work with me for a day. We will see then whether this craft suits you and whether you suit this craft. The young man's face lights with hope and gratitude, and he thanks the baker profusely before departing. After he leaves, the baker stands for a moment in quiet thought. Perhaps it is indeed time. Perhaps this young man represents the next link in the chain, the continuation of a tradition that has sustained this village for generations. The thought both excites and humbles him. This possibility of passing on what he knows, of shaping hands that will knead bread long after his own hands have grown too stiff and weak to continue. The later afternoon brings the beginning of preparation for tomorrow's baking. The baker mixes new batches of dough, covering them and setting them to rise overnight, a process that will develop deeper flavors and better texture than quick-risen bread. He replenishes his sourdough starter, feeding it with fresh flour and water, maintaining this living culture that connects him to all the bakers of his lineage. He checks his supplies, making mental notes of what needs to be purchased. Salt is running low, and he will need to visit the merchant. The honey pot is nearly empty, requiring a trip to the beekeeper. He needs more wood for the oven, which means arranging with the woodcutter for a delivery. These practical matters occupy his hands and the surface of his mind, but deeper thoughts continue to flow. He finds himself thinking about time, about the way it moves in a bakery. There is the immediate time of each task, kneading for this many minutes, baking for that many minutes, cooling for this long. There is the daily time, the cycle from darkness through daylight to darkness again. There is the weekly time, the rhythm of regular customers and their predictable needs. There is the seasonal time, the way ingredients and demand change throughout the year. And there is the longer time, the generational time, the sense of being part of a craft that stretches backward into history and forward into an unknown future. All these layers of time exist simultaneously in the bakery, overlapping and interweaving, creating a temporal texture as rich and complex as the bread itself. The baker moves through these various timescales, sometimes focused narrowly on the task immediately before him, sometimes aware of the larger patterns, the way his work fits into cycles both small and vast. As evening approaches, he takes a moment to step outside, to stand in the lane before his bakery and look at the village around him. The sun hangs low in the western sky, painting the clouds with shades of pink and orange and purple. Smoke rises from chimneys throughout the village, straight columns in the still air. People move about on various errands, finishing the day's work, preparing for evening meals, calling children home from play. Dogs bark, chickens settle into their coops, cattle low from the fields as they are herded toward barns for the night. This scene has played out countless times, in this village and in villages throughout the world, for centuries upon centuries. The particular people change, the specific animals and buildings might differ, but the essential pattern remains constant. Human beings living together, working together, supporting one another through the ordinary challenges of daily existence. The baker feels himself part of this timeless pattern, a small but necessary thread in the great tapestry of human community. He returns inside as the light begins to fade, banking the oven fire carefully for the night, cleaning his tools and workspaces, preparing everything for tomorrow's early start. His hands move through these tasks with the automaticity of long practice, requiring little conscious thought, leaving his mind free to wander. He thinks about the young man who came seeking apprenticeship, imagining what it would be like to have a student working beside him, to teach and guide and gradually transfer his knowledge and skills. There is something deeply satisfying about the idea, this sense of legacy, of ensuring that his craft will continue after he is gone. He imagines this hypothetical apprentice, years from now, standing in this same workshop, perhaps with an apprentice of his own, passing on techniques and wisdom that originated with the baker's grandfather, or even earlier. The thought creates a sense of connection that transcends individual mortality, a participation in something larger and longer than a single human life. Upstairs, his wife has prepared their evening meal, and the smell of cooking drifts down into the workshop. He climbs the ladder, muscles tired but satisfied, ready for food and rest and the simple comfort of domestic peace. They eat together, talking about their day, about the young man who came seeking apprenticeship, about plans for the harvest festival, about all the small matters that fill their shared life. After the meal, in that quiet hour between supper and sleep, they sit together near the window, enjoying the cool evening air. The baker's wife works at her mending, needle flashing in the candlelight, while he simply sits, too tired for any task, but content to be still, to let the day settle into memory, to appreciate this moment of peace. They do not talk much. After so many years together, they are comfortable in silence, their companionship requiring no constant conversation to maintain its warmth. The village settles into night around them, lights gradually disappearing as families retire, the sounds of activity fading into the gentle quiet of darkness. A dog barks somewhere, answered by another in the distance. An owl calls from the forest beyond the fields. The wind whispers through the thatch of the roof. These nighttime sounds are as familiar as daylight sounds, creating a soundscape that speaks of home, of safety, of a world at peace. The baker thinks about all the loaves he has baked over the years, trying to estimate the number and finding it impossible to calculate. Thousands upon thousands, certainly, perhaps tens of thousands. Each one a small act of transformation, a moment where his skill and labor took simple ingredients and created sustenance. Each one a link connecting him to someone in the village, a brief intersection of his work and their need. The cumulative weight of all those loaves, all those connections, all those moments of feeding and being fed is staggering when he considers it. Yet he never really thinks about his work in such grand terms during the daily doing of it. Each loaf receives his attention and care, but it is individual attention, specific and immediate. The larger meaning emerges only in reflection, in these quiet evening moments when the day's labor is complete and he can step back and see the pattern of which he is part. It is like looking at a woven cloth. Up close, you see individual threads, but only from a distance does the larger design become visible. The candle burns low, and his wife sets aside her mending, suggesting it is time for bed. He agrees, feeling the day's weariness in his bones, but it is a good weariness, the tiredness of muscles well used and a mind at peace. They prepare for sleep with the practiced efficiency of long habit, and soon they are lying beneath the wool blanket, the darkness complete, the silence deep. But before sleep claims him, the baker lies awake for a few more minutes, his thoughts drifting and settling like flour dust falling through sunlight. He thinks about tomorrow's baking, about the dough already rising in the workshop below, about the young man who might become his apprentice, about the harvest festival approaching, about his wife sleeping peacefully beside him, about the village wrapped in darkness all around. His life is not grand or dramatic, not filled with adventures or fame or wealth, but it is good. It is filled with honest work and genuine community, and the deep satisfaction of skills well learned and diligently applied. He knows who he is and what he does and why it matters. He is part of something larger than himself, connected to the past through tradition and to the future through the continuation of his craft. He feeds his village, and in feeding them, he helps sustain the bonds of community that make life not merely survivable, but genuinely good. The last thought before sleep takes him as simple and profound. He is grateful. Grateful for the work that gives his life meaning and purpose. Grateful for the community that surrounds and supports him. Grateful for the skills passed down through generations. Grateful for the simple miracle that allows flour and water and heat to become bread, the staff of life, the foundation of existence. Grateful for another day completed, another cycle turned, another small contribution made to the great ongoing story of human beings living and working and caring for one another. And with that gratitude warming his heart, like the oven warms his workshop, the baker sleeps, knowing that dawn will come soon enough, that the fire will need kindling again, that dough will need kneading again, that bread will need baking again. The wheel turns, the pattern continues, the ancient rhythms persist, and he is content to be part of it all, a humble baker in a small village, performing his small but essential role in the great human community. His breathing deepens and slows, matching his wife's rhythm beside him, and the bakery below stands quiet and dark, its oven holding warmth in its stones, ready for tomorrow's awakening. The village sleeps around them, secure in the knowledge that when morning comes, there will be bread, that the baker will rise before them and prepare the sustenance that makes their lives possible, that the ancient covenant between baker and community will be honored once more, as it has been honored for countless generations, as it will be honored for generations yet to come. In this small village, in this modest bakery, in the life of this ordinary man doing his ordinary work with skill and dedication and quiet love, something eternal manifests. The spirit of human community, the power of tradition, the beauty of craft, the simple goodness of feeding and being fed, of caring and being cared for, of working and resting and working again in the great dance of life that connects all people across all times. The night deepens. The stars wheel overhead in their ancient patterns, and the medieval baker sleeps the deep, peaceful sleep of someone who has lived a good day and will wake to live another, his hands ready to knead, his heart ready to serve, his life a quiet testament to the enduring power of simple, honest, necessary work done with care and dedication and love. And so our journey through a medieval baker's day comes to a gentle close. We have risen in darkness to kindle fires, felt the warmth of ovens glowing against autumn's chill, kneaded dough with ancient rhythms, and watched a village come alive around the comfort of fresh bread. We have discovered that the most ordinary lives contain extraordinary beauty, that daily work performed with care and dedication becomes sacred, and that true contentment lies not in grand adventures, but in honest labor, genuine community, and the simple satisfaction of feeding those we serve. Thank you for spending these hours with Medieval Sleep Tales, for allowing us to carry you into a slower, gentler world where hearth fires crackle and bread rises and all is well. If you found peace in this journey, please like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to join us for more cozy medieval stories. Explore our library of tales designed to soothe, relax, and transport you to quieter times. May your dreams be warm and your rest be deep. Until next time, from Medieval Sleep Tale Eyes, sweet medieval dreams.